Hello everyone, my name is Frestiani Rahadian Sitoresmi with 3 last digits student number 170. In this presentation, we will discuss about two personality theories that follow genetic approach, which are Cattells and Eysenck's personality theory. First, let's begin with Cattells. Cattell's personality theory is known for its rigorous scientific method. The aim of his study is quite different from other famous theories. Unlike other psychologists whose goal is to treat abnormality, neuroticism, mental illness, however they name it, Cattell was more interested in finding a way to predict behavior in various situations. He believed that studying the basic of human behavior is an important step before attempting to do much complicated effort such as treating illness. That's why you will find that his work discusses things that are different from other psychologists such as psychoanalysts, even though they were both explaining about personality. Other uniqueness of Cattell's theory, as well as Eysenck's that we'll discuss later on, is that it touches the role of hereditary on personality more when compared to other theories. Cattell believed that both genetic and environment have influence in shaping personality. He came to this conclusion after his experiment on twin and non-twin siblings raised in the same and different house. Through these experiments, he found that a third of personality is genetic based, whereas the remaining two-thirds is environmental based. And now let's talk about personality according to Cattell's theory. So as I mentioned earlier, Cattell's approach to studying personality is by exploring the basic structure in order to understand the entirety of it. Cattell did this by exploring the concept of trait. So what is trait? According to Cattell, trait is mental elements that consist of reaction tendencies that are a permanent, basic structural units of a personality. If you remember, Cattell's goal is to be able to predict behavior. And that's how he defined trait is when he used the term reaction tendencies. For example, if someone reacts to a situation in similar ways in different times, it means that that reaction is a pattern of his trait. In studying about trait, Cattell used a very specific and scientific method called the factor analysis. What is factor analysis? So factor analysis is a statistical method of narrowing down several variables that have correlation into fewer common factors or traits. For example, we find that people who perform well on writing tests also scored high on speaking test. After assessing the correlation, we determined that verbal intelligence is the underlying factor of these two variables. Hence, the score is similar. The result of this method is what Cattell determined as traits, or he also often called it factors. Factor analysis is aimed to solve common method variance problems in researches. Now, common method variance is a variance that is still too broad because it is attributed to the way the measurement is done and not the construct that are supposed to be represented. For example, we want to measure intelligence, and we do so by testing subjects' speaking and writing ability. And the result will be high or low score on speaking and writing tests. These variables are still too broad because it is attributed to the way the measurement is done. Meanwhile, there is actually a factor that is underlying those results, which is verbal intelligence. Verbal intelligence, on the other hand, not only becomes the bridge that connects the two variables, but it also better represents intelligence as well as making further assessment more simple and easier. Hence why factor analysis is used as a solution to this problem. After familiarizing ourselves with Cattell's method of factor analysis, we will discuss about how he categorized traits. There are several sets of categorization Cattell proposed. However, I will only explain about several of them. The first one is common versus unique trait. Common trait is traits that are possessed by everyone in differing degrees. Common trait is the result of similar hereditary potential possessed and social influences experienced by humankind universally. An example for this is extroversion. Have you guys ever done MBTI test online? If you have, you will know that we will get the percentage of extroversion in the result. So even if you are an introvert, you will still have several percent extroversion in your personality because it is a common trait. Unique trait, on the other hand, is less common and it is only possessed by few other people. For example, an interest in psychology. Next, we will talk about source trait, which is another categorization of traits, but it also became the base of Cattell's personality test. So, source trait is the basic factors of personality that are derived by using factor analysis. Source analysis has a counter trait, which is called the surface trait. So compared to surface trait, source trait is more stable and permanent throughout the entire life, as well as less visible in real life because it underlies behavior. Source trait is the result of Cattell's factor analysis, and it is applied in the 16 personality factor questionnaire, which is a personality measurement test designed by Cattell. In this test, Cattell provided 16 sets of source traits as well as its counterpart. So high score will represent a source trait and low score will represent its counterpart. Lastly, there is dynamic trait. So dynamic trait is traits that are concerned with the motivation of behavior. For example, if I have a goal of getting good grades, then I will show similar behavior during class at different times, which is paying attention to the teacher. According to Cattell, trying to explain a behavior without mentioning the topic of motivation is just like trying to make a machine works without a fuel, which is useless. Cattell proposed two dynamic traits, which are ergs and sentiments. Ergs are an innate energy source or driving force for all behaviors, the basic units of motivation that directs us toward specific goals. He identified 11 ergs, which are anger, appeal, curiosity, disgust, gregariousness, hunger, protection, security, self-assertion, self-submission, and sex. So, for example, I have an urge of security, and because of that urge, every time I walk alone at night outside my house, I will carry a pepper spray. And on the other hand, sentiment is a pattern of learned attitudes. I'm sorry about that. Sentiment is a pattern of learned attitudes from the environment that focuses on an important aspect of life, such as community, spouse, occupation, religion, or hobby. Compared to sentiment, Irk is more permanent, whereas sentiment is not because it is a learned attitude, so it can always be unlearned. And then for the last part of Cattell's theory, we will talk about his stages of personality development. So there are 6 stages, which are infancy, childhood, adolescence, maturity, late maturity, and old age. The first stage is infancy. In this stage, a lot of part of personality is formed. Family and experiences such as weaning and toilet training plays an important role. And social attitude also develop along with ego and superego, feeling of security, neuroticism, and attitude towards authority. In the second stage, which is the childhood stage, children start to become more independent from their parents and identify themselves to their peers. And then in the third stage, it's called adolescence. It is a stressful stage because it's full of conflicts regarding independence, self-assertion, and sex. The next stage is maturity. In this stage, personality becomes less flexible, and as a result, emotional stability increases. The fifth stage is late maturity. This stage is similar to Jung's midlife period, if you remember, which is where personality is heavily influenced by physical, social, and psychological changes. And the last stage is old age. In this last stage, we deal with all sorts of losses, such as losing people through death, losing career due to retirement, losing status because of the standard of society that prefers youth over maturity, and so on. And this brings the feelings of loneliness and insecurity. And so this is the references I use for this part of the presentation. And next, let's move towards Eysenck's personality theory. So earlier today and also last week, we have learned about Alport's and Cattells' approach to psychology. We know that both consider genetics as an important factor that influences personality. And now we are going to talk about Eysenck, who also support the same idea. Alport, Cattell, and Eysenck have the similarity, which is that they are a part of behavioral genetics. Behavioral genetics is the study of the relationship between genetic and personality. So no matter what kind of method is used in the study, the point is that they heavily consider genetics and hereditary as a factor. We already knew Cattell's findings regarding this theory, which is that a third of personality is genetic-based while the rest is environmental-based. And what about Eysenck? So Eysenck leaned more on the nature side rather than nurture. His studies also on twin siblings and adopted children supported this idea because he found that the variable that has more similarity genetically also have more similarity in their personality. And there is also findings that suggested that his personality measurement test is also applicable in diverse cultures, meaning that a change in the environment doesn't change much of the outcome. So genetic must pose greater role instead. Generally, he believes that environment also influences personality, but its role is limited. And now let's talk about Eysenck's personality measurement test. This test is called the Eysenck Personality Inventory, and it is based on Eysenck's and his wife's concept of 3 dimensions of personality. So what is this concept of three dimensions of personality? So this concept has the notion that the structure of personality consists of three dimensions, which are a combination of several traits and factors. And yes, this is the same traits and factors as the term used by Cattell. So in fact, this concept is actually kind of like the extension of Cattell's works. So Eysenck agreed that with Cattell that factor analysis should be used to derive traits. But he thought that Cattell's works are prone to subjectivity and was hard to replicate. Hence why, in addition to factor analysis, he also added personality tests and experimental studies with a wide range of variables to improve this weakness. So the three dimensions of these concepts includes extroversion, neuroticism, and psychoticism. Like Cattell's, this test also provided a counterpart of the dimensions. So high score will indicate the dimension, while low score will indicate its counterpart. The first dimension is extroversion, with introversion as the counterpart. It is characterized with orientation towards the outside world, pleasure when in others' company, sociability, assertion, etc. And when investigating the biological cause of extroversion, Eysenck found that extroverts have lower level of cortical arousal compared to introverts. And as a result, introverts react more strongly than extroverts to sensory stimulation. The next dimension is neuroticism with emotional stability as the counterpart. It is characterized with anxiety, depression, high tension, irrationality, mood change, etc. Eysenck suggested that neuroticism is largely inherited. And research found that neurotic individuals have high brain activity in areas that control the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, which is part of the brain that is responsible for responding to stressful events. And as a result, they react strongly even to mild stressor, making them naturally hypersensitive and highly emotional. And the last dimension is psychoticism. It is characterized by aggressiveness, antisocial behavior, tough-mindedness, coldness, egocentrism, etc. Its counterpart is called impulse control. And through Eysenck's research on people with high score on psychoticism, he found that they tend to have authoritarian parents. And this proved the possibility of childhood experience influencing this dimension. He also found that men tend to score higher in psychoticism. So he proposed the idea that this dimension is related to male hormones. And so overall, through cross-cultural studies done to test the application of this test in various cultures, it was proven that this test can hold its stability. Eysenck also suggested that diversity of the combination of the three dimensions will make a better society. And this is the reference I used to make this part of the presentation. Okay, so after learning about Cattell's and Eysenck's personality theory, we gain a new perspective on the study of personality, which is the emphasis on the relationship between nature and nurture in shaping personality. We also get to see a more scientific way of forming a theory, which was kind of neglected in a lot of classical personality theories, such as the psychoanalytical approach. And I hope this can help broaden your view of personality and behavior and also encourage the importance of scientific method in academic study. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a good day.